JC, thanks for joining us today. I want you to tell the listeners a little bit more about yourself so we know exactly where you're coming from and they can put your valuable tips to the best use for them.
Sure. So my name is JC Deen. I have been in the fitness space, I guess officially since about 2010, but I've been writing, and I guess I've been technically on the internet writing since 2008, 2009 for fitness stuff. But the way I got started was I was growing up as a kid, and I was really chubby and overweight. And one of my earliest memories was 9 or 10 years old, and I asked my mom if I could go on a diet because I hated being fat and didn't like being bigger than all the other kids. And as I got into junior high and high school, I really got involved in sports, and that was kind of the turning point for me for two reasons. One, I learned that I really loved exercise, and I loved competitive athletics. And then I also started to notice my body change from the exercise and the change in my energy expenditure. But the main thing that I got out of athletics was I absolutely loved strength training and working out with barbells. And so I got into college. My first year of college, I made a bunch of friends who were equally interested in weight training, and I decided to get ripped for the first time in my life. So I took all the information I had at my disposal, read a ton of books, read a ton of forum posts, and ended up getting really lean, lost 30 to 35 pounds, and had a six-pack for the first time in my life, and I was really excited about that. And that was kind of the first glimpse into what I'd be doing now, which is coaching and working with people and helping them get stronger and lose fat and just, build their bodies. And when I was in college, it kind of became this obsession of mine. And fast forward a few years through college, I found myself thinking about this more and more and more. Eventually got certified and started working with individuals. And then I made friends along the process with various people in the industry, primarily because I had started a website and I started writing and I started getting published in various places online. And one of those friends I made was Alan Aragon, and he took a liking to me and we became friends, and I got to chat with him quite a bit. I met him at a few conferences, and I remember sitting in my bedroom when I was at the university and getting ready to finish my degree, had about a year left, and I was training clients and writing on the internet and getting published and building a following. And I told him, I was like, hey, I really want to do this, really want to do this full time. I don't have much guidance. I'm not sure exactly what to do. What do you think? And he told me, he's like, I really believe in you. I think you can do this. You're a good writer. You're a good communicator. You understand exercise and physiology. And he was like, I think you should just jump in with both feet. And shortly thereafter, I left university and I continued to study and continued to train clients. And then I continued to do writing and put out stuff on the internet. And it was 2010, I guess, February 2010, when I officially quit my job to work on fitness full time. And then shortly thereafter, I left university, and then I was just completely training and doing all this internet stuff with fitness. And fast forward to now, I've been doing online coaching. I've been writing programs, selling programs online, doing consulting for various fitness ideas, and consulting individuals on training and nutrition. And I joke about it, but online coaching is kind of like, it's like this huge thing now. And I was doing online coaching back before it was ever a thing.
One of the OG.
Yeah, 2011, 2012, before anyone really, I don't even think online coaching was even like a real term that you would think in your head.
Not like it's omnipotent now. It's everywhere. Everyone's an online coach nowadays, right?
Yeah. So now now I'm like thinking, well, what's the next thing that I can do before anyone else does?
Yeah, get ahead of the curve again. So
Yeah.
it's a really interesting backstory, and thank you so much for the listeners. It's possible that that's the second take we've had to do. The technology failed on me there, so to make sure you got that, we redid that. So I think patience is obviously a virtue as well, and JC showed plenty of it with me there. So thank you for that. Now I just want to touch on a couple of points there. One of which actually referenced kind of like a mentor who'd achieved a lot and showed their faith in you and their belief in your potential. How important was that to you committing to, I'm going to go all in on this?
It was really important because a lot of times when you're doing something new and you're trying things out, it's not good enough to have your own validation and your own belief in yourself, right? I mean, it can take you so far, but when you have someone that's older than you and ahead of you and that's come before you, kind of getting their approval and I hate to say this, I mean, it's not like you don't need anyone's permission to do anything. You do whatever you want to do, but having someone who believes in you is really helpful. And for me, it was really important because I didn't have any formal studies in physiology or exercise. I just had my experience from working out and giving advice and helping other people. And then I had, all the hundreds and thousands of hours of reading physiology books and studying it on my own outside of class. So it was really kind of assuring to have someone push me in that direction, even though I didn't have the so-called credentials other than like a personal training certification.
Sure.
And then a few years later, I made really good friends with John Romanello, and he was another person that was instrumental in helping me, move forward in terms of continuing to do the online stuff and continue doing what I do now.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it's huge.
Yes. Well, I mean, having someone who's been there, seen it, done it, can help you navigate some of the potential pitfalls of any process, but also must have given you huge confidence. Having those guys fighting your corner, as it were, and that's actually in some respects important. I think for guys listening, starting out with their training, one of the great reasons to have a coach is for that wisdom and experience that they've developed over years, and they can save you making a lot of the mistakes that otherwise you probably had to go through with your training, doing all the things the magazine said and kind of learning for trial and error. But having some more experienced people there taking your hand and navigating you through that process can fast track things, both in in the gym and I'm sure with your online business as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So obviously having a coach is one thing that can help you get towards your goals, but when you are working with people, what are the sort of most common reasons that you find people fail to achieve their goals? They have these big dreams they want to achieve, and then so many people don't get there. What's holding them back?
Yeah, so I think there are two ideas that are mainly holding people back, and the first one I'll touch on, I think, is a lack of belief in their self, and I don't want to be like too vague on that. So, having a belief in yourself comes from many different avenues, right? It comes from many different angles. What you're told growing up, your experiences growing up, how you cope with certain stressors and how you deal with things. And I feel like a lot of times people want to get in really good shape, but they don't have any previous history of accomplishing something that was important or accomplishing something that was hard or going through anything that was tough. And what I always reference myself is I remember going back to the first days of getting started with athletics, and it was really, really tough because I was overweight and I didn't really have the cardiovascular capacity and a lot of things, like a lot of things happened. That was when I was really young. But I remember going through all that stuff, so I had previous wins that I could look at. And one thing I think people should understand is, whatever your goal is, you most likely have it in you to achieve it, but it's a matter of building up small wins along the way and looking back at those as reference points that you are capable, you are worthy of the goal, you can do it if you put your mind to it. And this comes back to a discipline thing, right? Being disciplined they say, discipline is ultimate freedom, right? Like the more disciplined you are, the more you get what you want, and the less disciplined you are, the worse off you are in the end. So I think for some people it's a lack of belief, and this really can come down to just not having the history of previous wins and successes to give them the courage to actually take the leap and do what they said they want to do. And then also that comes with I think people don't understand how hard things can be sometimes.
Yes.
Like a really easy example is someone comes to you and they want to lose 50 pounds and they're not exercising, they're eating out all the time, they're not getting enough sleep, their life is hectic, right? Well, there's a lot of things that you got to change and fix in order to get from point A to point B. And we're creatures of comfort, unfortunately. We want to do the things that give us comfort and that make us feel good. And a lot of those things that make us feel good, at least in the interim, in the short term, are not necessarily going to help us in the long term. So, it's easier to go through the drive-through and get a greasy burger and fries and a Coke than it is to go to the grocery store and buy great ingredients and go home and make a meal. And that's a huge change for a lot of people.
Yes.
So having belief in yourself and actually understanding what it's going to take is really hard. And I think that is one thing that holds people back. When they get down to the brass tacks, they figure out, hey, this is actually a lot harder than I thought. And this leads me to the other idea that I think is really important to understand is that nowadays we have so much information that's in front of us that it's so easy just to get lost and get confused and never actually reach the destination because you have so many distractions. And I think about it, we've always had access. I say we always, I mean like the last 50 years, right? Like we've always had libraries. We've had access to information. It may not have been as easy to access it as now from your phone, but we've always had access to information. The biggest difference now is where we get our information is also where most of marketing and advertising is happening. And you may know that you want to lose 50 pounds, but when you go on Facebook and you go to my Facebook group where I don't sell any potions, pills, or powders or magic solutions.
You don't?
No, I don't. As of right now, I don't. I might have some in the works.
A proprietary blend in the works.
Yeah. So you go to my Facebook group and you go to ask a question about how to get started on your weight loss journey. And as you're typing up your question, you look at your sidebar, and what do you notice? You notice an ad for, a magical 21-day workout plan that's going to help you lose 50 pounds in 3 weeks. And while you and I both know that's just bullshit, it's stupid, it's dangerous, the person that is looking for help and doesn't understand this stuff, they can't know what they don't know. So they click over there and they're out of my group. They're out of, they've lost their chance of actually getting really good advice. And they spend the next 6 months chasing after these, big promises and following these so-called programs and diets that just aren't going to help them. And it's not to say that it's the person's fault. It's not, because you don't know what you don't know, right? Like, how are you supposed to know the difference between good and bad information if it's not anything you have any experience with? And that's what I think one of the biggest issues that we are facing now is there's so many marketers and ads that are pining for your attention, and it makes it impossible sometimes to find exactly what you're trying to get. And then when you do find something that you think is good, then how are you supposed to know? I mean, I'm sure people find my stuff and they're probably asking the question like, hey, is this guy legit? Can this guy really help me? The last 10 Instagram coaches that I paid are no good, and they never followed through and helped me with my plan. And how am I supposed to trust this guy? He's saying completely opposite of what they are. So I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you touched on some great points there. I'll sort of recap on and maybe go a little bit more in depth on a few of them. And the first one was that kind of concept of small wins and being able to reference back to times when you've had success. And I think that's crucial. And a little bit of success boosts your confidence, your self-belief, and then your motivation. And it's almost like a sort of a positive upward spiral then. It increases your chances of success even more, which in turn increases confidence and motivation, and it just keeps going up and up and up. So I think that's a great concept to apply, is breaking down maybe your big goal into some small wins, and not expecting too much of yourself too soon, but knowing that you're going to have to put the hard work in over time. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. And another thing I thought was interesting, you talk about discipline, and I think a lot of people think of discipline and motivation almost as interchangeable, but they're actually two very different things. Could you give me your thoughts on how you think discipline is different to motivation?
Yeah, so in short, the way I always tell people is motivation is it's helpful when we think of motivation as a feeling, right? And it's a fickle feeling. So we've all had the experience where something happens in an instant. We look at ourselves in the mirror and we immediately don't like what we see, or we're at the grocery store and we see this, we see something that makes us, like, in the instant, you're like, oh man, like I wasn't really planning on buying this cake, but it looks so good, and you know what, like I really need this. I had a hard day at work. Like there's all these little blips of like experiences we have, and so at that moment, you look at yourself in the mirror and you feel this like, oh, I got to make a change. I got to start exercising. You're like it's powerful. Or you're in the grocery store and you're like, oh, I really want that cake. Like I'm hungry and I deserve this, whatever. It's like a powerful emotion, but that doesn't really last very long, right? So you might look at yourself in the mirror and you feel for a moment really bad, and you say, okay, tomorrow, no matter what, I'm getting up at 5 a.m. and I'm going to go for that run that I promised myself I would. That way I can get back and shower and be at work by 7. Well, 5 a.m. alarm comes shortly thereafter, and you hit snooze and you realize, you know what, like I don't look that bad. Like I'm only a few pounds overweight. I'm not really that concerned, and I never wear a bathing suit anyway. I always wear I never go to the beach, so it doesn't really matter. So you kind of like rationalize all this stuff, and then you can realize that when you feel motivated, like in those short little moments of either you're excited about something or you're really sad about something, you feel a motivation to change. It doesn't normally last, and this is why I try to help people understand, especially when I'm coaching them. I try to help them understand, like I'm not interested in motivating you from a short-term perspective. It's great to watch videos. It's great to look for inspiration and motivation, but ultimately that has to come from within, and you have to learn how to build the motivation that's more intrinsic than extrinsic. Mm-hmm. So how this differs from discipline is, in short, doing the work regardless of how you feel or what you want to do. If it's important to you, like that you want to exercise 3 or 4 days a week, then it's important that you do that regardless of how you feel. Yeah. You don't want to go to the gym today? Tough titty. Who cares? It doesn't matter. Like, just do it, because this is part of who you are, and this is important because you want to feel better and look better and perform better 6 months down the road. It's just not about feeling good now and skipping the gym session, because I guarantee you, once the hours pass and you realize you could have worked out, you're going to regret it more than actually doing it.
Sure.
So the way this plays back into true motivation, what I kind of like to call momentum, or it's like a snowball effect, right?
Yeah.
Like I tell people, like, let's build momentum and forget about motivation, because when it comes to momentum, the more consistent you are, the more you do things on a regular basis, the more likely you are to put in your words, as you build that positive spiral upward. You're building a positive feedback loop. The more you do that, and the more you can check off the times that you've done what you said you would do, the better you actually feel about what you're doing. So you're more likely to stick with a long-term training program if you can just get through the first 4 weeks, and then you can break that down, get through the first day, and then promise yourself, hey, I've got 3 more days to work out this week. I'm going to get through those. And then what do you know? You've just gone through a week. You've exercised all the days you said you would. Now do it again the next week. And then before you know it, you've exercised consistently for 8 weeks.
Yep.
And then 6 months, and then 5 years. And that's building momentum. Like, don't break the streak, right? And the more you do something, the more of a habit you build, the more of a ritual you build around that, the more motivated you're going to feel. And then some days are going to come around and you're going to be like, oh man, I'm low on sleep. I haven't eaten enough. But you're so used to doing the thing that you do it anyway,
Yes.
regardless of how you feel.
Yeah.
And that's why I try to help people understand, like, it's good to feel motivated in the short term. It's good to feel like that short jolt of like, oh man, this feels great. I'm going to do this thing. But you might not feel that way tomorrow morning. But regardless of how that feels, you should just do what you said you would do, because, forcing yourself to be disciplined is going to be way more valuable in the end than having that brief spot of motivation.
Yes. Okay. So again, some great points there, and we want to pick up on a few of them before we move on. But yes, as you talked about, motivation ebbs and flows, and I think it's that short-term emotional feeling, and that's one of the reasons why it's important for people to take action quite quickly when that motivation strikes. Take advantage of it, because kind of almost every minute, second, hour, whatever you don't take action, that motivation will wane a little bit, and then you maybe never get started. So I think sometimes you use the motivation to fuel you, and then you've got to realize that discipline is what's going to make the difference. You can't rely on motivation forever. And secondly, you talked about habits and rituals, and almost then you train on autopilot, not that meaning you're not working hard, but it just happens because it's so ingrained in your lifestyle. So, I 100% agree with that. And are you keen on trying to build these habits and rituals into people's lives? And if so, how would you go about, could you give us a sort of an example of how you work with someone and you gradually built those habits up for them?
Yeah, I mean, that's a big part of my, like, that's kind of like my OM, that's part of my coaching.
Yeah.
It's really important to me because, like, the way my coaching style is, like, I'm not a good motivator. I don't want to be a cheerleader.
Yes.
And it's just not my personality. And I think if you talk to anyone that's talked to me personally, they'll know that I'm really warm and I'm encouraging, and I can help them and I can give them clarity. But there is nothing I don't like the idea of motivating someone every single time they've got to go to the gym. And the reason I don't like that approach is because that person has to always be reliant on someone else in order to do something that's good for them. So when it comes down to helping people establish these habits and establish more discipline, that's one of the first things I work with people on. And I look at the individual and I look at what they're doing, right? And I look at, like, where they're at and what their starting point is. I get people that come to me that have been training for 10 years and they're like, hey, I'm super focused on my workouts. I go to the gym 4 days a week, yada, yada, yada. Those people are really easy from a programming perspective because I don't have to help them build the habits of exercise. Now they have other things that they might need to work on, whether it be getting to bed earlier or whether it be actually planning their meals and not eating out as much. But if you take someone that's not really exercising and not doing a ton and they need help building those habits, one thing I help them do is break down everything into the smallest part that they can do immediately.
Yeah.
And part of getting confidence is doing these things consistently enough to actually feel good about what you're doing, so you continue doing them and then you build on those things. So if someone comes to me and they're not exercising frequently enough and they're going here or there, I always say, look, how much can you realistically do this week? And they'll say, okay, I can realistically go to the gym 3 days this week. And I'll say, okay, so let's plan it out. Let's set the days that you intend on going. But the only rule is you only need to go to 2 of those workouts. If you get the third workout, it's icing on the cake. But we know for sure that we need to do a Monday workout, we need to do a Wednesday workout. If you get the Friday workout in, great. And so what we're doing here is we know what they can reasonably do, but if you break it down a little bit and you make the task a little bit easier, and they hit those 2 days, they commit to those 2 days, they're going to do the third day.
Yeah.
And then the next week, it's going to be a little bit easier. And then after 3 or 4 weeks, they haven't missed a session, then I move on to the next thing.
Yes.
What do you need to fix next? And I find that is really helpful in keeping people, helping them build the discipline. And then the other aspect of it too is I'm expecting a report every week, and I'm expecting them to stay in touch with me, and I'm going to check in on them. I'm going to see how they're doing. And having that external accountability, at least in the beginning, to get someone to build those habits is usually really helpful, because they know not only am I letting myself down, but I'm also letting the coach down, because I'm paying them to help me, and they're expecting me to do this.
Yeah.
And so that's what I tend to help people do is, and I walk them through certain things too. Like I help them see why habits and why changing the behavior is important, right? And I usually will lead with the pain. And most people don't like to hear that, right? Like everyone just wants to feel good all the time.
Yes.
But I like to lead with the pain because, unfortunately, as humans, we tend to try to avoid pain than attain something that feels good, at least in the long term. And when I'm doing coaching and I'm setting up their initial profile, I ask them various questions, and I say, what's your most important goal? Why is it important? And then how much pain are you going to experience if you don't actually follow through and do this? And then I get them to unload and tell me how much their life is going to suck if they don't do it. Mm-hmm. And then I use that against them.
Yes.
And I basically say, look, you want to be consistent with your exercise because you have type 2 diabetes in your life, and your dad just got, some of his toes amputated from diabetes that he could have controlled. How important is that to you? And I know that's kind of like a grim, approach, but I think it's really helpful because the person sees how important it is. And I find usually the greater the pain, the greater the more the person actually sticks with what they want to do. And most of the time, and I'll say it now, six pack abs is usually not a good enough motivator for most people. It might be for the 19-year-old guy in college that has no other stress and just wants to look good on the beach, but it's typically not good enough for the 45-year-old person who has diabetes in the family and is working 6 days a week.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, for most people, it falls into the want rather than need category, right? And needs are what people are more likely to take action on. So that I think that's 100% correct. And would you say that your transformation from that sort of fat kid that wanted to get ripped, that came from a place of pain? It wasn't just you obviously wanted to look ripped, but there was underlying issues there that were causing you real angst and struggle and pain, and you needed to do something to take action to stop that.
Yeah, because I just didn't like how I felt about myself, and I didn't like how that affected my self-confidence and my self-esteem, and I didn't want to be self-conscious as I was growing up, so I had to go through the pain of exercising a lot and tracking my food and sticking to the goal.
Yes.
And throughout that process, I had people that were holding me accountable. It wasn't just knuckling through it myself. I had people that held me accountable, people that I'm still close to this day.
Sure. So who was holding you accountable back then? Yeah.
So I don't know if he'll ever hear this podcast, but his name's Lawrence Hosanna.
Okay.
And he is. It's funny how I met him. Actually, I was scrolling through bodybuilding.com. I was going through their body space, back when body space was kind of their own social media thing.
Sure. And
I found this guy named Lawrence Hosanna. He had an incredible physique, and I remember sending him an email, and I was like, I really need your help. I love your stuff. I love what you posted, and blah, 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 blah. He wrote back, and this was my first experience in getting coaching online, which kind of blows my mind now that I think about it. But he wrote back, and he was like, hey, man, I can write you up a program. I can give you feedback on food and give you some ideas. Here's my PayPal. Send me my fee, and I'll help you. And I did, and I got really great results. I followed everything he asked me to do, and this was my second time getting lean, and it was very, very specific. I forget what it was. exactly for, but I ended up getting some photos and going to going on vacation or something. But
Sure.
it was very specific as to like what we were doing. And I mean, to this day, like he's still a friend. We talk and stay in touch, and yeah. So it was a really interesting experience.
Yeah, I bet, and it's really cool. It's cool to hear because your first insight into online coaching, as you say, and then you've moved on, and that's your profession and how you pay the bills type thing. And I think there's a lot of people that actually haven't been coached, so they don't understand how to be a good coach if you've never been coached before. So that's probably valuable now. A lesson that you've learned that is helping your clients as you coach them through their journey.
Yeah, it's very, I mean, that was my formative years in terms of understanding this stuff and like seeing the psyche of someone else and why they do what they do and why they don't do what you ask and a lot of other things.
Yeah. Funny you say that. Also, you talk about how you access that. That was on a forum, and earlier on you mentioned about how there's almost information overload, and people don't know what's good and what isn't. And the access to info, there's so much info out there. It's just abundant, and the barrier to entry, as it were, for information now is much, much lower. Before, you'd have to really be committed to, I'm going to travel to the library, I'm going to read some books, I'm going to invest some time. And people can almost get instant gratification of going on their phone now, Googling an issue or a six-pack ab workout, looking at it, and then almost mentally they're like, yeah, I've done the groundwork, and parking it there, where the reality is obviously very different. Do you think that's one of the issues nowadays, is people they give themselves a pat on the back before they've actually done any work?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that. This is a big problem, and this is something I think about a lot actually, and it's something that I'm really interested in from a psychological perspective. But you're right, we get instant gratification just by looking up something or learning about something, especially when it confirms our bias. So if you think you feel a certain way about something, like an example is, I've been dieting for so long and I can't lose any weight, and it's got to be these damn carbs I'm eating. And then you Google, why do carbs make me fat, whatever. And then what do you see? You see all this confirming information about why carbs are fattening. And then the person sees, oh, well, the reason is because I've been eating this many carbs and, I've been dieting, quote unquote, and I'm not losing any weight. And so now the solution is I'm going to go on a carnivore diet. I'm going to go on a keto diet, whatever.
Yes.
So they immediately get that gratification of like, oh, now I know why I'm fat. And this is exactly why. And I was smart enough to think it was because of the carbs. And now I really know it's because of the carbs because I just looked it up. So we get that instant gratification of why, or we get the instant gratification when we learn something. And then the other time we get this gratification, which blows my mind, but I get it because I've read about it and I researched it, is when we decide to do something for ourselves. An example is, let's say we decide to hire a coach, or we decide to like buy a book, buy a program. We feel so good at that moment that we make the decision and we pay the money, that we almost sabotage ourselves because we don't end up doing the work.
Yes.
We get so much gratification from actually just deciding and making the decision and buying the program, that when it comes down to actually do it, we come down to do the work and we realize, oh my God, like this work is going to be really hard. So what will happen is, and this happens with ebooks all the time, right? Like, even books at the library, or not the library, books at, the bookstore, Amazon, people will buy a diet and training book and they feel so good that they made this decision. And then the book shows up, whether it's in their inbox or it's at the door, and they see, oh, this book is 300 pages and I need to read through it and actually think about what I need to do. And I need to have a baseline understanding of what I'm going to do. And then I need to actually do it, stick with set up my diet and go to the gym and be consistent with my workouts. And I mean, that's why most people just never follow through. They get that immediate gratification from the purchase or the initial burst of like confirmation bias.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, they like the theory, but they're not interested in the application. And then, yeah, that just having a little bit of theory, or acknowledging that they've taken that step of researching it is almost enough. Like, oh, I'll get results now, or whatever. So, yeah, I think that happens all too often, and it's holding a lot of people back. And sadly, I'm not sure people even really know they're doing it. I mean, they probably on one level they know they're doing it, but people are so good at lying to themselves, they almost do tell us, "Oh, I've tried everything," whereas in actual fact, all they've done is ordered a couple of books off Amazon and never read them.
Yeah, true. Or they've tried 10 different diets for a day at a time.
Yes, yeah, mate. I'll tell you what. There's a new ebook for you. You can package the ultimate diet, and you cycle through all these different phases. I'm sure the people think that was a wonderful idea. So with all the your experience personally transforming your physique and going from a sort of a fat kid to being in shape and helping people from all different walks of life and different backgrounds, are there some key mindset tips that we haven't touched on that you think are really important, that people can take away and they should be applying? Or do you think we've basically covered the meat and potatoes of it already?
I think we've covered most of it. I don't have really any other things that I think would be able to, go off in just like a few minutes.
Okay, cool. So on that basis, then I've got a few quick fire questions for you.
Sure.
Just like get a little insight into what makes JC tick. So first up, it's pizza or burger.
Pizza.
Chocolate or peanut butter?
Chocolate.
Beach holiday or city break?
Beach.
And then if you're having a steak, is it rare or well done?
As rare as possibly can be.
I'm not sure anyone's ever given me a different answer to that question. Okay, and then next up is, can you tell me and the listeners something about you that people probably don't know?
Sure. So when I was in college, my initial declaration of study was classical piano.
Right. Okay.
And and then after my next stint, because I went to college twice. I tell people I started off and then I took a few years off and then I went back. And my second stint was actually in journalism and advertising.
Okay.
And I left because what they're teaching in advertising school is 20 years behind what's actually happening.
Sure.
Like in the real life.
Okay.
So,
well, I suppose that second one makes a little bit of sense about how now you write, you blog and sell information products and stuff. But the classical piano, that came out of left field. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah, most people don't.
Kept that one under wraps. And so, last question before you give everyone a chance to know a little bit more about where they can learn more about your stuff is, if I could interview anyone in the world, who would you suggest is my next guest?
Okay. Someone I hold in high regard, someone I think the world of. I don't know if you've interviewed him already. I would reach out to Andy Morgan.
Andy Morgan. Okay, cool. Yeah, ripped body.
Ripped body.
Yeah. Okay, great shout. Okay, cool. So that pretty much wraps us up. I just want you to take a chance now to let everyone know where they can find more about you, the services you provide, and all that information you put out there, so they can learn more and perhaps work with you.
Sure. So the easiest way to get to me is just my initials, JCD Fitness, just jcdfitness.com. Everything is there. I have info products. I have stuff for men and women, and all my coaching information is there as well.
Superb. All right. Well, I'll make sure that we've got the links in the show notes below this podcast, and listeners go get yourself a little bit more information there. Check all those out. There's some great content on the website. I've read most of the articles on there, and it's really excellent stuff. So that's all from me. Thanks for listening, and we'll speak to you soon. That wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. We really appreciate it. If you enjoyed what you heard and took value from it, please do me a favour by heading to iTunes right now, subscribing to the show, and leaving a review. Positive reviews, like 5 stars, hint hint, really help the ranking of the show and will help us to spread the word and keep getting top-class guests on. Make sure to follow Breaking Muscle on social media and me at Tom McCormick, that's TOMMACCORMICK on Instagram. Bye for now, and I'm looking forward to catching you on the next episode of the Breaking Muscle podcast.